because I've been now a Sangoma for 17 years. So like most of my life, well, not most, I'm 40 now. So it's about half of my life, pretty much, I've been a Sangoma.
Yeah.
So I've grown up as an adult who was also a Sangoma. I didn't get to be an adult without being that too. The illness, the dreams, the confusion, the this, the that, like all of the typical usual symptoms, but also uncovering a particular capacity and ability to see beyond what is presented to my physical eyes. Parenting is hard anyway. So regardless of where you're parenting, the conditions, the physical conditions, the material conditions of your parenting, it's still difficult because the world outside is very much working counter to our humanity. A big part of the work that I do and what I teach is that you are not exceptional. You're special because it's you, and everybody needs you in this world for the world to be what it is in all the best ways. And, you know, we delight in your existence as a person, but you are by no means exceptional. There is absolutely nothing that you are going to do that is going to like blow anybody out of the water in that sense, because every human being has the responsibility to teach and learn. So you're just doing that again, you know, and the smarter, more exceptional, more different, more individual you think you are, the less you can learn and the less you can teach.
Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Baffoe. In this podcast, I speak to Africans from across a multitude of sectors, including business, art, culture, media, design, technology, advertising, and everything in between, delving into their journeys and reflecting on the lessons they have learned along the way. It's about gaining insight into why and how they do what they do. These conversations offer a treasure trove of takeaways on a wide range of topics, including craft, relationships, wellness, parenting, entrepreneurship, and much more. Okay, so my guest today is Gogo Nokulinda Mkhize, an author, an accredited integral coach, a cultural consultant, and a practicing Sangoma. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So where are you?
Right now, in my house, in the Midlands, in KZN.
So I know you were in Joburg before.
Yeah.
Why'd you move the family to the Midlands?
Well, I'm originally from here. I'm from Pietermaritzburg. I arrived in Joburg as an adult. I was 25. And then subsequently got married, had 4 kids, and then COVID happened. And we thought to ourselves, everything that we're doing, we can do from home. So why doesn't our home be somewhere better, you know, for the kids, for ourselves, just the environment and everything. So we decided to relocate. We wanted our children to be closer to our family, which means having them be more integrated into our culture. I needed to be closer to my family as well. Tim, my husband, also needed a break. He'd been living in Joburg for 30 years or so. And he also needed a break. And we thought, you know what, we need land, we need fresh air, and we need close people to us.
I find that some people took the lessons from COVID. A lot of people didn't get the real lesson from COVID in terms of what I believe is what's important, right?
Yeah.
Like what's important in life. Like why are we doing what we're doing?
Yes.
So it sounds like you guys got the lessons loud and clear.
I think so. And, you know, I had struggled coming from a rural environment to living in the city as an adult. I never quite adjusted. So I spent all those 11 years just complaining and complaining. And so when we finally got an opportunity to consider leaving the city and going back to an environment that felt more familiar to me, that felt healthier to me, we didn't hesitate.
So how did you end up in Joburg in the first place?
If I tell you that my ancestors told me to move, will you laugh? Essentially, that's what happened.
I will chuckle. I'll chuckle, but I won't disbelieve.
Yeah,
you.
so
Let me put it that way.
I was 25, and literally one night or like one morning, there was this message that said, "Go and work in Gauteng. What are you sitting here for?" And so I woke up, and that same guiding voice said, "Go and speak to so and so." I spoke to so and so. I applied for a job. I was accepted for the job, and within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so, I had relocated to Pretoria. And then from Pretoria, again, Okay, now that you're in Gauteng and you understand, go to Joburg. Same thing. Dream, connect, move. And that's how it happened. It wasn't part of my plan. I had never wanted to live in the city. I never wanted to go away from my family. But something came when I was 25 that said, you know what, get up and move. And then I did that.
What was the plan when you were 12, 13?
I was 12. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any plan. I never
Well,
knew.
what was the, so, I mean, what was was there a dream? Like, was there okay,
No.
I want to do this when I grow up.
I never understood or knew how people could be so certain about their lives at a young age. And I remember in grade 2 already, you know, when they ask you at school, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I remember being 7 years old and thinking to myself, I don't know what I want to do. I'm just a child. I have no idea. And that stayed with me
Mm.
forever. And when I look back, I think I realized that it's because what I needed to do wasn't in my frame of reference as a person. So I couldn't know what I needed to do until I started doing it.
Mm.
So only when I became a Sangoma
Yeah,
when I was
and yeah.
23, I was like, oh, that's why I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I needed to do.
I mean, I think that's interesting, particularly when you look at the world today, where more and more we're realizing it's not linear, right?
Mm-mm.
Um, you know, we're raised with this very linear outlook on life. Like you know, you go to nursery school, you go to primary school, you go to high school, you hopefully go to tertiary, you get a job, you move your way up, which is a very linear way of looking
Yeah.
at things. And I'm finding, and you know, you have kids as well. I have two children, but I'm finding the conversations I have with them about finishing school and what they're going to do is influenced by the fact that my life, my working or professional life, was never linear.
Mm.
But at a young age, I had a clear idea in terms of this is where I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to do. And then life kind of taught me otherwise.
Yeah.
Like I guess life taught me what you intuitively or instinctively knew, which was, you know, I'm a child. I don't know where I'm going to end up. Even as an adult, like even as a 28-year-old, if you told me I'll be doing what I'm doing now and where I am, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah, because life is so much more rich and complex and dynamic than what we are taught to believe, you know? And so that kind of linear progression is basically preparing us to be in the labor market. It doesn't speak to our dreams, our ambitions. And I'm not at all disputing that a lot of people do find purpose and meaning in their work, in their careers, in their jobs. But there is a lot more to life than knowing what you want to do for a living, you know, and what that might mean for you. And also, people start different journeys at different parts of their lives. Because, same with me, like if you had said to me, you're going to write X books, you're going to study this, or you're going to have children, I wouldn't have believed you because it was never something that was in my imagination.
So what did you study when you say you applied for a job in that where you ended up in Pretoria? Like what
Okay.
was it?
I studied geography and development studies. So I very much work in kind of the social science space. And at that time, I was working for a healthcare facilities management consulting firm, you know, looking at kind of infrastructure development and, you know, healthcare sciences and that type of thing. Didn't last very long in the job. I was there for about 6 months. And it was just like, what I understood in my life was that, okay, this was the reason to get you out of your parents' house. So now that you're out, you've learned what it means to be in a serious job and have responsibilities, quit. You know, quit and try something new. And then I did that and I did that. And eventually, by the time I was turning 27, I wasn't working a job anymore. I was consulting full time as a Sangoma in Joburg.
How so the thing that has fascinated me kind of watching you and kind of engaging with what you do is you're able to marry that, let's say the traditional with the modern.
Mm,
And you know, in this world, especially today, I'm hoping that we're starting to have the conversations that you, for example, had in your book Ancestry,
mm,
which is, these things aren't mutually exclusive. They can coexist within a space. Has that always been easy for you? Because I interact with other people, and you'll find when somebody leans to a very Western lens and very modern lens, they struggle to see how the traditional and the ritual and the perspectives that our people have had for kind of time immemorial, they struggle to bring that into their modern lens.
Yeah. I think for me, what's different is that I don't see myself through a Western lens. So for me, I've always understood, and this is how I was raised, and this is how my parents and my family are, is that the Western world is the Western world, and we will equip you with the tools to kind of move through it, just like every other African. Do you know what I'm saying? So what happens outside at school, at work, and all of these things is just that world. And understanding that you can participate in that world, but that world wasn't built for you. It doesn't take you into consideration at the fullness of your humanity. And what you do in that world is basically to support your survival in it, while at home, our culture, our beliefs, how we relate with one another, how we fit in with each other, that is actually what can make you a person. And so I didn't have I would say, the displeasure and the trauma of having to recover from assimilation into thinking of myself and seeing myself as a person through a Western lens. So for me, it was just like, oh, I'm a Sangoma, that's cool. So life is outside, that Western world is there, and I go to it, but who I am is rooted somewhere else.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, because in a country that is still very racially driven, I mean, a world to a certain extent, but South Africa, for me, I find that it's like the US. It's kind of on steroids. So it's like multiplied by 100.
Yep.
And when I moved here, I struggled with that personally. But your husband comes from, is of a different racial, within a South African context, he's a different race.
Yeah.
And your children, therefore, are essentially like me. They're biracial.
Yeah.
If you have to use racial terms, right?
Yeah.
How do you? So I'm gonna ask a question, but I'm gonna say this as a semi-disclaimer.
Okay, I don't need the disclaimer. This would be for your listeners.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like I'm being extra. My father's Ghanaian, my mother's German, and my father was, he grew up very Pan-African, and those are the ideals that he raised me with. My mother passed when I was young. So I remember at 15, 16 years old going, okay, so you raised me a particular way. You raised me with a particular kind of lens in terms of an identity, in terms of how I see myself within context of the broader continent. And then you married a white woman.
Yeah.
Like how, I was like, make that make sense to me. Like I'm not arguing it. So he said, your mother was not a white woman, your mother was your mother.
Well, think of it like this. It's like feminists who are also heterosexual. The struggle isn't against the individual. The struggle is against a system of oppression. And so if a person sees themselves as a human being first and moves in the world with that sense of integrity, then we don't need to wonder or consider what are the implications of me making a family with. I mean, his father is British, the headquarters of colonization, but he's a person. I'm not unaware that he's white. I'm also not unaware that my children are called colored in South Africa, even though they're not. We know that being biracial doesn't necessarily mean colored, but having to grapple with that is not an issue. And also, I'm not the first person in my family to marry a white person. My father's grandfather, one of his wives, was white.
Okay.
One of.
So it's in their blood. Somehow.
Well, you know what? People are people. And I don't want to say it in a kumbaya kind of way. But when you have a Pan-African sense of the world and you lead with the principle of Ubuntu, then you recognize other people that lead with that. And then they erase their gender, their class become secondary because all of those things are constructs anyway. And if people don't buy into
Yeah.
those ideologies and they see them for what they are, it becomes a lot easier to relate, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I asked that because I find that a lot of people, especially in this country, still struggle to reconcile. Some of these things. It's like they struggle to reconcile because the starting point is that construct, as you say.
Yeah.
Like the starting point is your complexion, your hair texture, you're this, you're that, as opposed to the human being.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things I found, and some of the advice I was given when I was getting married is, it's, do your values and your principles align?
That's pretty much all that matters.
As long as those align, everything else is secondary.
And it truly is. And I don't want to say that in the South African context, like, Kumbaya, Rainbow Nation, but in a very kind of radical sense of what does it mean to be a person? And we say we are Pan-African. What are those values? And do they mean at the exclusion of or at the recognition of our joint humanity? And that's what Pan-African is about, or Pan-Africanism is about. It's like being a woman who's a feminist, but is also heterosexual. How do you reconcile that? Well, what are you going to do? Men are also people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm jumping around a little bit, but basically on that note, so I started reading Kitchen Wisdom, and I've got it here with me, and I'd like to read the subtitle for the listeners. It's like, what we hate to hear but need to know about men and romance. I felt like I was eavesdropping on a conversation I wasn't supposed to be eavesdropping on.
Well,
when I started reading the book,
like
as a man,
yeah,
it felt like I was like,
it's like you're walking past the kitchen and you're like, should I be? Let me.
Yeah, should I be hearing this, because this is addressing me and my kind, and kind of helping women deal with me and my segment. Now I'm reading it and I'm getting those insights. Like I felt a bit guilty.
Well, look, I suppose it is a book written by women. My sister and I wrote the book together, predominantly for women, but it is, I think, an important conversation for men to have, or to understand what goes on, because, with the kind of power disparities that we have between men and women and how those express themselves from the political, with the, gender pay gap, to the social and things like, normalizing of sexual assault and violence against women and children, and just even on an interpersonal level, where men and women can't seem to figure out that they desire each other's company and care, but also don't seem to find anything, mutual in common. And the common ground seems to only be sexual desire. I mean, this is what we need to do, is like bridge that gap and bridge that divide, right? Because we are all people.
Yeah.
And one of the big, one of the big wins of inequality and injustice is to make women and men enemies, when we actually are just human beings together.
And so I tied it back to something because I haven't finished, to be honest, I haven't finished both your books, and but what was interesting for me in Ancestry, and it kind of sparked something, because I have an aunt who used to talk about this, about for example, gender roles, and how it seems like we bundle gender roles into the discussion around equality. And she was like, it's two different discussions. Like, you can play a particular role within your home and your family that may feel driven by your gender.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you are less than or you are better than because you're filling those particular roles.
Absolutely. When you think about, even like in Isintu, there's very specific delineations for what person does what at what time and what point of their life. And a lot of those delineations do go across age and gender, but it's that, that Western lens that we were talking about, that can't see things that can be different but equal. it always has to see things as in a hierarchy of domination and power. So anything that is, so the ones who can do the heavy lifting are perhaps physically stronger, but that doesn't make them better than the ones who can do the weaving and the fine beadwork. So in that Western lens that I speak about a lot in Answer Story, I'm simply just kind of challenging that notion of we need to be able to look at the world as like more like a sphere, you know, and rather than a triangle where there's the top and there's the bottom and one thing means better than or less than, and just challenge that, because if we could do that, it would help us a lot in being able to accept and embrace the, you know, the responsibilities that we have and the duties that we have towards each other and towards ourselves.
Yeah, because that Western lens is very binary.
Yeah.
It's like either or.
Yeah.
For, against.
Yes.
Good, bad.
Yeah.
Whereas life is, you know, life is filled with nuance.
It is.
And that binary outlook results in the nuance being overlooked.
Yeah.
And I find that especially in a country like this, with its history but also such diversity, when we lose sight of that nuance, it's actually what creates more of the problem.
Yeah, it does. You know, losing that nuance is losing the texture of humanity, and it is dehumanizing to like diminish people and distill them into either this or that, because you can sit here today interviewing me in this way, but you have other interests and capabilities that go beyond this. So capitalism and the system that we live in says if you are the host of a, you know, talk show format, then that's what you do. And so anything else that you might like to do doesn't matter, because the thing that you make money from or the thing that you do the most is the thing that defines you. And that simply isn't true.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, for me personally, it's been an interesting journey because I've worked in so many different spaces that at a kind of a young age, that didn't define who I was. So I had to craft my identity separate from what I do for a living.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to answer the question, so what do you do? You know, and I've never, for at least 20 plus years, I've never been able to really answer, okay, I do this.
Yeah.
Because I've always done different things. And I think that's the journey a lot of people are taking. And we were talking about COVID, and you know, when you looked at COVID and the lessons from COVID, where for a lot of people, all of a sudden that work was not the dominant thing.
Yeah.
And you have people having kind of mini existential crises because all of a sudden you're not going to the office.
Yeah.
Or you don't have a job anymore. Or you're with your family and you're spending so much time you're like spending more time with your family than you have in however long. And all of a sudden the things that you used to define yourself, the things that you felt were of value in terms of you as a human being, that was taken away because we're all in our pajamas and tracksuits sitting at home.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, to the point of what you were saying earlier about you not being able to tidily answer the question of what do you do can make it difficult for people to relate with you, because people need a hierarchy. You know, that's how our brains are trained. So if you say, okay, I am an artist, or I'm a chartered accountant, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm an entrepreneur, like people can put you on a sliding scale of how much value they can attribute to your existence based on your occupation. And so when you can't answer that question, or you don't ask people that question, people find it very difficult to relate, because like you said, that binary thinking comes into play. But COVID did teach us a lot about you thought it mattered. It doesn't. You know, deadlines was such a big part of your personality, and now the whole world is shut down. What are you going to do? What is your real personality? Who are the people that matter most to you? And who are you, you know, most importantly, because you've got nothing to shield you. You've got no title to shield you. You've got no occupation to shield you. So reckoning with yourself. And I guess, you know, to what you were saying about people having these crises of realizing that, yikes, there's more to life than being a cog in a system that runs, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's sad for me is that to a certain extent, it looks like people are trying to get back to that, get back to something. And, the moment has passed.
Yeah.
And you cannot return to something. But I look at, across the world and in certain pockets, there's this attempt to go backwards.
Yeah.
And not actually gain from the lessons that this pandemic kind of taught us to a certain extent.
It's very true. And I think that, systems, because here's the other thing, and I don't want to sound like I'm some woo-woo conspiracy theorist. I mean, I love a good conspiracy, but the truth is that we live in a system, and the system requires a level of buy-in from us to keep it going. And the system also doesn't require a level of buy-in from us because we don't, our decision-making capacity as just general citizens is not that great. There's places and spaces where real power moves, but we are chasing this idea of what rather than the idea of who and the idea of we, because it somehow has been so indoctrinated into us that we become so afraid to ask ourselves the simple question of who am I? What makes a person? And this is what I discuss a lot in my first book, Answer Story, which is just like, be umuntu ebantwini, be a person amongst people, and interrogate what makes a person to you. What is a person? And what is your duty as a person? And what are your rights as a person? And where do you belong as a person? And, those kind of things. And I got a lot of very emotional messages from readers about Answer Story, like, you are blowing my mind and I can't stand you. And I can't believe that you're making me think about these kind of things because I thought that my life was a certain way. I thought I understood. And now I'm in my feelings. And how dare you?
You're forcing people to confront the stuff that gets pushed into that little corner of the mind.
Yes, they were like, I picked up this book thinking I'm going to feel motivated and inspired and I'm just going to, be my ancestors' wildest dreams. And now here you are shattering my absolute consciousness and I can't stand you right now. And then 3 chapters later, they're like, oh, it makes sense. Sorry, I shouted at you. I love the book. I love you too. So,
Can you tell me about the journey of becoming a Sangoma? From the outside, like it tends to be viewed with kind of, I don't know if trepidation is the right word. There's misconception around it, and often that misconception comes with judgment and prejudice, as opposed to, okay, let me understand what it is.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me, I don't know where to start because I've been now a Sangoma for 17 years. So like most of my life, well, not most, I'm 40 now. So it's about half of my life, pretty much, I've been a Sangoma. Yeah. So I've grown up as an adult who is also a Sangoma. I didn't get to be an adult without being that too, But the journey is the same, excuse me, as everyone else. The illness, the dreams, the confusion, the this, the that, like all of the typical usual symptoms, but also uncovering a particular capacity and ability to see beyond what is presented to my physical eyes and to know things and understand certain ways that go beyond rational, aka Western forms of intelligence, And so if you think about it from a Western perspective, it's completely unusual, doesn't make any sense, and you'll never be able to explain it in a manner that doesn't make people want to put you at a queso, But if you think of it in a more universal, non-colonial sense, it's just like, oh, okay, so you are connected to other realms and forms of intelligence that are not just human and not just academic. Oh, okay, cool. And you can speak to other people and you're connecting through time and space because we are ultimately spirits. Okay. You understand how, trees work and like how to use the, trees to help people. Oh, okay, cool. There's one in every family, one way or another. So it's not such a big deal, It's not as big a deal as people make it out to be, but it also is a very big responsibility as well. I don't want to diminish it in any way and make it sound like it's just a flippant thing. It's a big job, but it's not as unusual or exceptional as people like to make it out to be. I am just another member of my community and I have a particular skill set that is important for the
Mm.
functioning of my whole community, just like people that can raise animals, just like people that can grow food, like people that can predict rain, people that can mediate conflicts, you know, people that can sing. Like it is a gift, but it fits into a bigger ecosystem that allows our communities to thrive. It is not a standalone, exceptional, oh, so special kind of thing. It's a function in
Mm.
my community, yeah. And it's a function in time in my lineage as well.
What are your thoughts on, I mean, like a city like Joburg, right? With urbanization, with the impact of colonialism, the impact of apartheid, the impact of capitalist systems and perspectives and all of that, where there's become a disconnect, and to a certain extent, I've personally found. I mean, I have no you know no basis for it other than kind of a feeling is particularly within a South African context. So growing up in Lesotho, having family in Ghana, having interacted with people from kind of across the continent, in South Africa it was particularly brutal.
Yep.
In that it's like people are cut off at the knees.
Yep.
Right. So that connection was, it feels like it was lost in a kind of a more extreme sense. I find that in other places you'll find some of those rituals, some of those those elements of culture have, even with urbanization, are still kind of retained in little ways.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal, but you as a child, I always gave my father something with my right hand, with my left hand. When you walk in a room, you greet a particular way. And different cultures have different approaches. But within a South African context, because it was so, I mean, it was so brutal and to a certain extent efficient.
Yeah.
Like it's effective because it was so efficient.
Yep.
And like you said, it's a responsibility. How do we start to recreate, or at least create some element of connection to that? Like create that continuity, even though this gap was created. I don't know if I'm making sense of.
So I think that one of the great kind of wins of that colonial apartheid system was to almost convince people that it wasn't doing what it was actually doing, And like you said, our consciousness, our identity, everything that we stood on for thousands and thousands of years, for generations and generations, was just kind of cut off at the knee. But not only just cut off and left there, it was cut off and then replaced by, number one, kind of an inferiority, like, okay, African things are whatever. We know all of that story about African ways, African people, African traditions, principles, methodology, and everything are backward, they don't exist, you didn't have it, and if you did have it, it was stupid, then replace it with an aspiration for the standards that were imposed by the very system that took away your own thing. And working as a Sangoma in Johannesburg showed me something that I had never really grasped, and that is the efficiency of the colonial and apartheid system and the efficiency of capitalism is to make people think that they don't have to be people with other people. As long as you have a thing that you have bought, as long as you can work in that kind of way, then that is your humanity complete, And so when people butt heads with that kind of framework and way of thinking, they lose their minds because they're like, but I have all the stuff. Why am I still miserable? I bought all the things for my kids. Why do they still hate me? I did 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I feel like the difficult thing for people that they're going to have to do is to face the fact that they thought that assimilating into the systems of capitalism and, feeling better than thou in the sense of having stuff and believing themselves above their culture and the teachings of their culture, like the greeting, the respect for elders, taking responsibility for yourself in a group, and all of that kind of thing. They have to first face the fact that they thought they wouldn't have to do that because they thought they were above it. And then realize that actually these are the things that made us people, and that it takes effort and intentionality and humility to inculcate values of a certain nature to ourselves and to our children, and that it's a full-time job that you have to really think about every day.
And it's being repackaged. I mean, in a weird way, certain aspects are being repackaged and sold back to us.
Yeah, everything.
Because now, I mean, if you look at Eastern culture, you look at Buddhism, you look at all these different things, and and you talk about it, you write about it, but we had knowledge systems, like we had ways of governing, we had like across the board.
Yeah.
And now things that are similar to what we had are being taken from somewhere else, and we're being told, oh no, this is how you must do it.
Yes.
It's about it's about community. It's no more about just the individual.
Yeah.
It's about community, and you kind of go, yeah, but
we knew that.
That's how I've always operated and lived. You came and told us, no, we need to do it this way, not that way.
Yeah. And now that we've all moved away from it, the typical thing of like create the problem and then sell the solution, because now you can go and learn about reconnecting with nature. But what 1913 Land Act, you took away the land that we were walking on anyway, and now you're telling us we need to pay money for a retreat to go and walk on land. What do you mean? You outlawed traditional medicinal practices under the Witchcraft Act, of the 50s and in the 70s, and now you're telling us that we can have midwives to give birth. We don't need to have a C-section, and that actually certain trees and plants do have medicinal properties, and we don't all have to swallow pills for everything. Well done, so efficient. Propaganda, win-win all across the board. Look at us. We are the Popeyes,
I was watching a random video. I think it was on one of the social media platforms, but it was one of those reaction videos. So there was an American talking about the power of clay in terms of in building.
What?
And all the, so it's like a whole video with a voiceover, and they're building walls, and it's like, the beautiful thing about clay is you can do this, you can do that, and it's one of those, your reaction right now, it's one of those kind of, where it's a reaction video, and the person's like, I think it was a Nigerian woman, and she's like, yeah. Okay, so you are telling us this now? Like, we were uncivilized because we did this all along. I'm so... But I've seen it in so many things, like in birth practices, parenting, birthing, relationships, food, nutrition, wellness, exercise, just every single part of our lives. We've seen that thing, and in the books that I've written, it's all about just like, by the way, did you know that we already knew that? Did you know that that was already accounted for in the scientific and social systems of civilizations that came before us? We are not the smartest humans in this iteration of our existence. We are not the smartest humans. So when you think you want to advance in your thinking, in your living, in your doing, and you want to do better, you've actually got to look behind you and see what was already done. Then you will find a really good, all-encompassing kind of approach and solution that can help you move your life forward. If you think you're going to rely on this intelligence of this system, you are going to be stuck as the least intelligent of your lineage. And then you're going to call yourself your ancestors' wildest dream, and they're laughing at you like, you don't even know maths. And when you get there, they're like, you just wasted however many years.
Because you bought into the exceptionalism of it all, And I think a big part of the work that I do and what I teach is that you are not exceptional. You're special, because it's you and everybody needs you in this world for the world to be what it is in all the best ways. And, we delight in your existence as a person, but you are by no means exceptional. There is absolutely nothing that you are going to do that is going to like blow anybody out of the water in that sense, because every human being has the responsibility to teach and learn. So you're just doing that again, and the smarter, more exceptional, more different, more individual you think you are, the less you can learn and the less you can teach.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reading something around that, like this idea that, success, you're only successful if it's big, right? You're only successful if you're great. Like, everybody's now working to be great. Like, if we're all great, then in reality, no one's great.
Yeah.
And also it's all right to not aspire to that thing, because it can become a cage in itself.
Yes.
Because if you're defining it according to how society says you're great or you're successful when you achieve XYZ, that's always a goal that you'll never reach, because there's always somebody more. Somebody with more money, somebody with more cars, somebody with more houses, somebody with a bigger business.
Yeah.
So with those things, it actually becomes a trap.
It does.
And becomes this kind of loop that you're stuck in. It becomes that treadmill. Whereas it's actually all right to live your life in the best way possible, the best way for you.
Yep. And what's best for you, if you think of it in the kind of framework of Isintu, is what's best for you is best for us. So in coaching, there's this principle. It's just slipped my mind. Oh, the essential I and the social I, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but basically it's like there is you, the spirit, the soul, the essence, right? And then there's you that is now socialized to survive in this world. And our culture, or Isintu, all kind of indigenous cultures everywhere, don't make a big distinction between you and the group, because the group is you and you are the group, but you also have an individual responsibility and right to exist as yourself. And so if we see ourselves as the I in the primordial we, what is good for you is good for us, because anything that elevates you, anything that enriches your life, anything that makes you happy and doesn't cost the community anything. Like, you can't just become a megalomaniac, obviously, but anything that's good for you is good for us. Anything that enriches you enriches us. Anything that keeps you safe keeps us safe. And so to be able to understand that and to say it's okay to not be the first of, top of, it's okay to just live a life that moves things along in a manner that is not only not harmful, but safe and consistent and predictable, because that also takes discipline and patience to show up in your life every single day. And to be able to be and do that and almost kind of resist the urge to break out and be the first ever, biggest, whatever, is actually what makes our communities survive. It's the daily work of being a human being. And the humility that comes with just moving along, collaborating, cooperating, innovating at your own pace, but moving it along, because what's good for you as a person and keeps you safe and grows your spirit and, delights you. And it's also good for us, because the best you can be is the best you can, like, that we can expect and enjoy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with somebody years ago, around when I turned 40, and I bought a motorcycle. And they were like, "Oh, you're going through a midlife crisis," and I'm like, "There's no crisis. Like, I'm at a particular age, and there's something that I've always wanted to try. It's not destructive.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not impacting negatively on anyone. And in fact, when I get to go out and ride and it's just me beneath that helmet, I am a bit more settled.
Yeah.
Like, so for my family, in terms of my interaction with my family, me being able to go out on for 2-3 hours on a Sunday on my bike and I come back, I have a different energy about myself. And it's not destructive.
Yeah.
So if I'm riding in a particular way that is destructive, then like you're saying, then it has a negative impact. But not everything is a crisis. Not everything is a disaster.
And not everything has to be
and I'm busy reading
good or bad. Things can be also that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just is.
Yeah, it can just be it. And you're allowed to also enjoy your life without having to earn that. Because then the question would be, why are you riding? What does it give you? Are you starting a motorcycle club? Are you going to become like a professional rider? Are you going to turn it into a side hustle? And it's like, no, I'm just going to enjoy myself as a human being. And the more you enjoy yourself, trust me, the world becomes a much better place,
Yeah, doing things for joy.
Yeah.
Doing things just for the sake of... I'm a big believer in, it's like, do things just because. Like, because it crossed your mind. Or you wanted to try it out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to have a... I'm a big believer in hobbies. Like, there's a guy called Austin Kleon who I read a lot of his stuff. And he was the first kind of person in his writing that reminded me, like, we used to have hobbies.
Yeah.
Like when you wrote your CV in high school, I remember being in high school and you're being taught how to put together a CV. And there's a line there, hobbies. And all of us was reading and watching TV, but you had hobbies in there. And we've created a world where everything must be monetized.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can, you can knit. Oh, are you gonna do scarves and sell them? It's like, no. Actually just I enjoy the process.
Yes.
And I think we've lost a lot of that just in terms of doing something because it gives you joy.
I agree. And that also includes, by the way, relating with people just because it gives you joy. Having friendships just because they give you joy. Spending time with yourself because it gives you joy. And it's this world we live in where everything must be earned or everything must be exchanged. So if you can't make money out of it and you can't exert power over somebody else with it, is it even worth it? And if you just have it for free, just like a good conversation, we're having a good time, I'm learning a lot, I'm chatting to you, like, this is nice. We don't have to do something about it just because that's like, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to, no. We can just have a good time.
Yeah.
We are human beings. We are here to delight and be delighted. Of course, the system and the economy will make you feel differently, but reclaiming that allowance for yourself allows you to move differently in the decisions that you make when you realize that being happy, being at ease, being at peace is your birthright. And being a good person who is delightful, who is respectful, who is kind to themselves and to others is a really big part of what makes you a human being.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. We delve into their journeys, the decisions they have taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the spirit takes us. Now let's get back into the conversation. How was the transition for your children from the city to the Midlands? Because I can imagine that what we're talking about, you're in the perfect environment to teach them that, but without, we're still in the city. So
Yeah.
if I have this conversation with my son or my daughter, it's everything else around them is saying otherwise.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of going, no, do you know what? It's all right. You can be like this. You don't have to study this because your teacher says, oh, if you want to build a career in something, you have to follow that path.
Yeah.
So often, or at times, the environment I'm in is contradicting what I'm trying to teach them. So it makes for a harder, let's say, a harder journey in terms of opening their minds to these things.
It absolutely
but I'm
does.
curious,
And
when you moved and how it is now.
So one of our big motivations was for the children. I grew up in KZN. So I went to school in Durban, so I could catch the bus anytime, go to the beach. I was with my family. There was a lot about my life that was very deliberate and intentional on the part of my elders to ensure that I developed into a particular kind of human being, you know? And I didn't realize up until I moved to the city and lived alone as an adult how much people were missing out on that experience, you know? And as we were having children, and I was working as a Sangoma, and I was kind of seeing the identity crises, spiritual crises, emotional turmoil, the kind of things that people were coming to me as a Sangoma for. And that isn't really what I do, and like what I'm supposed to be doing in my community. And speaking to my parents about it, I realized if I am to be the best possible parent for who my children need to become in their own way, in their own time, we cannot keep them here. And that isn't to say that some people don't thrive in the city and that the city doesn't have anything good to offer. I mean, Africans invented the city, you know. We invented the city, like in our history as human beings. Africans invented the city. They invented urban settlements, and they invented all the systems that go with it. So I'm by no means saying that you need to be rural and touch grass. I'm simply saying that there were certain things that were important in my foundational definition of being a person that I felt I could not give to my kids. And so it was a big motivation for us to say, what kind of people do we want our children to be? Especially because they are biracial, you know, especially because of that they're going to already have people pulling them this way and that way about who they really are and what are you and that kind of thing. We felt it was important for our children to be super grounded in active cultural participation and to define themselves as African. Biracial as they are, they need to understand what it means to be an African person and what it takes to be in a community. And that was a major, major motivating factor for us. And it was difficult and easy in a way, you know, difficult in the sense that they had friends and community and all of these things in Joburg, just like we did, but easy in the sense that, guess what? Look at all this land. We get to go to Malumes Banbani, Kokos Banbani, Mkudus Banbani. You know, we have all these events that we have fun with and that kind of thing. And so I think it was a good time when at that point, this is now 3 years ago that we did this, and our oldest was 8 or 9. And so he was just before that preteen phase. And then the youngest was, how old was he? 3 or so. And so he has, like, we can see in him the biggest benefits of the move because he was the youngest when we got here, and he's taken to this a lot more. And you can see his personality developing around the fact that he's a child that can run around and go places by himself and like fight monkeys, you know? So it was difficult.
I mean, I grew up climbing trees. Like I grew up climbing trees, and I mean, when my kids were younger, they're teenagers now, but I remember living in a complex and there's a tree. Then I'm like, guys, you can climb the tree.
But did the complex rules allow those?
What do you mean?
You know, the bylaws of the complex.
They did. That particular tree, they did.
Yeah.
But for them, it was like, what do you mean I can climb the tree? And I'm thinking, growing up, you just
climb the tree.
You climb it.
Because you saw other people
doing it. That's what happens with...
Yeah.
Because that's what trees are for. Like, if there's a tree there, you must climb it.
Of course.
Like,
and if you fall,
every now and then I drive around Joburg and I'll see a tree. I see a tree and I'll be like, oh, that looks like it'd be really nice to climb. Although the bones are not what they used to be.
Yeah, at this age, it's like you just go and talk to the tree and say, hi, I would have loved to climb you 35 years ago. Right now, I will just respect you because if you fall or if you just stretch wrong, that's 2 weeks off of work for you, you know? But see, parenting is hard anyway. So regardless of where you're parenting, the conditions, the physical conditions, the material conditions of your parenting, it's still difficult because the world outside is very much working counter to our humanity. And so whether you live in a complex, you live like we do, or you live, in Hillbrow in an apartment with your family, the parenting journey is always going to be difficult because you still have to make people of your children. You still have to be a person towards your children. And your environment can have its limitations and its opportunities that are going to enrich your children in a certain way. My children are going to be like me. I can't get on an escalator. I'm 40. I still struggle because, I have to think about it. If I'm stepping on an escalator, I've got to think about it. People that grew up in the
Yeah.
city, they don't have to think about it. They have a particular skill set that being in the city allowed them. My children are going to be able to skin a goat. Well, my son already does. And the city boy of his age won't necessarily have that skill set. So I think
Yeah.
there's no either. I mean, it's not an either or situation. There's tools that your children will have that my children might not have because of the environment that we live in, and vice versa. But ultimately, the
And vice
parenting
versa. Yeah.
journey and making people and supporting the growth of who they truly are is really the hard work. And the environment that we're in, you just have to kind of accept it, because what are you going to do? You like, Joburg is where work is for a lot of people, and Joburg is also home to a lot of people for many generations. So it's not like it's an option to just be like, well, we're leaving. This is where they belong. They are native to the city of Johannesburg, or to the area of Johannesburg, for whatever, and that's just how they are. So it's important, I think, to also understand and remember that it's not the environment necessarily that can parent for you, but you have to parent within, and sometimes in opposition to the
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, and within in opposition and within context of that
Yes.
environment, like you're saying, like my children were born at Joburg. You know, they were born in like Santon Mediclinic.
Yeah.
Like they're Joburg people.
Mm.
I came to Joburg as a 28-year-old. I mean, I used to come here all the time for
Yeah.
business, but I moved here as a 28-year-old. So I have a particular relationship with them. Whereas for them, this is where they're born. This is their home. They're Joburg people through and through.
Yeah. They're native to
Um, and
Johannesburg.
and I yeah, and I remember before I had kids wondering whether I would want to bring up my children in Joburg.
Mm.
And at the time, kind of going, Joburg is not the place to bring up children. And then having children and kind of going, you can actually build a really nice life within the city for a family.
You can.
So, like you're saying, it's working within context of that environment,
Mm.
and kind of countering what you feel doesn't work in terms of what you're trying to raise your children, the values you're trying to raise your children with, but also being open to the fact that there are things that are accommodating, that are positive in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no, once you become a parent, you realize that there's no strict right or wrong. You will make mistakes. You will make mistakes, your children,
Every day.
every single day, no matter how hard you try. And so just accepting that you have limitations and there are also other opportunities allows you to then be honest about your parenting journey and be honest about your relationship that you're building with your children, so that you don't become that parent that says, to a pop star, you're a bad influence on my children. No, just you make sure that your children aren't exposed to that. And if they are exposed to that, learn to have the difficult conversation so that you don't, relegate your agency and responsibility of being umuntu as a parent to the media, to popular culture, to the politics, to the systems that govern and oppress us and make our lives more difficult. It's your responsibility to be a person and teach your children how to be the same.
What do you spend your days doing? I mean, I'm now waiting. You talk about this, and I'm now waiting for the parenting book. I think you did kind of knowledge systems and that, and now
Yes.
you've done kitchen wisdom for the women.
Yeah.
I'm now waiting for the parenting
The
book.
parenting book
what
has
do
to
you spend
come.
your days doing?
Oh, it depends on the day. It depends on the season. And I'm so happy to be able to say that. I feel very privileged and blessed to be able to say it depends on the day, it depends on the season. In winter, 4 o'clock, I'm up. It's cold where we are. I've got to light up the coal stove so that by 6 o'clock, when the children wake up, the house is warm. So then it's 4 o'clock, light the fire, make breakfast. Then sometimes I've got consultations, first thing in the morning. Sometimes it's just like I can take a nap. Other times I'm outside gardening. Other times I do admin and emails like other people, But because I am in charge of my own time, Mondays are for this, Tuesdays are for that, and so on and so forth. But a lot of my daily work is basically just making sure that my children are happy and comfortable and that I'm moving my body. So there's a lot of work, like physical work, that I do on a daily basis, which I enjoy. And I'm glad to have a body that allows me to do that. But like a lot of household work, a lot of cooking, a lot of thinking, a lot of writing, a lot of just kind of swanning around. I start my day early so that like in rural villages, women are up like super early. Then at 11 o'clock, you see them chilling with a basket, weaving a basket, chatting. That's how I want to live my life. And that's what I'm working towards. But it takes a lot of organizing because I've got a lot of different jobs. I'm a coach, I'm a Sangoma.
Yeah.
My husband and I have a business and all of that kind of thing. So I've got to find a way to do all of these things and still find time to be an auntie at 11 o'clock who's weaving a basket, metaphorically speaking.
What business do you have with your husband?
My husband and I have got a creative agency and production company called Mashoba Media. And we do kind of broadcast, entertainment, live events, creative consulting, cultural consulting, and that kind of thing. But now that we're here, we're a little bit like, that's like Joburg work. We should buy a tractor.
Because I bumped into him once. I bumped into him once or twice where he's talked about he's come up for something.
Yeah.
Is he the one that comes up when you need to deal with Joburg?
Yes, he is. I try to limit coming to Joburg. If I don't have to, I don't. But because a lot of the work in the creative, entertainment, and broadcast sector is kind of headquartered in Johannesburg, then he comes up to Joburg. So we've got a very, without the oppressive elements of what migrant labor has represented for our people through history, we have that kind of very normative, the dad goes out to the city and then comes back home kind of a vibe, which is actually quite nice because it's also important for people who are married to be able to spend time apart. And living in the city doesn't always allow for that to happen. And it was very stressful when we were in the city, when he would travel into the continent, because we do a lot of work also on the continent. He would travel for work, and being in Joburg, I was so anxious all the time and terrified to be with the kids without him there. But now he's like, I'm going to Joburg for 2 weeks. I'm like, bye. See you later. It doesn't feel the same because I feel so much safer and more settled here. But we are thinking like we're getting older, first of all, and media is transforming at such a rapid rate that it's very difficult to keep up if you don't want to keep up. So we are looking at other options that are more aligned kind of with the pace of where we are and also the location as well. But for now, we are very much go to the city, do work on Zoom, and then come back and feed the sheep.
Sounds like bliss.
It's lovely. I don't want to lie. It's amazing.
It sounds like you're closer to my idea of. I also made certain decisions like 10 years ago about restructuring my life and kind of the working 8 hours a day is overrated.
Yep.
And I started working for my father at a young age, so I'm always like, I've actually put in a good shift.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to get my head around, if I only work for 3 hours and I don't have anything else to do, there's nothing wrong with not chasing after something, not hustling after something.
Oh, it's absolutely.
Like I've done my work. And it took me a long time to kind of get to the space where things don't feel wasted, even if I'm not doing anything in inverted commas
productive. Yeah, because you being alive and healthy is what is really productive for your family, And so at some point, because you've done so many things, you've lived in so many places, you've experienced life across so many different types of paces and experiences that, of course, at some point, your brain is going to tell you like, yo, this, I don't have to do it like this. And you're going to take that risk. But I think that exposure and that desire for something that is true and something that is grounded and something that is real is going to cause you a decade ago to be like, let me reevaluate what I'm actually doing and then try to do things in a way that is a lot more manageable and meaningful. Because it's all fun and games, these 14-hour working days and all of that until you're sick. And then it's like everybody's begging for their time back. But and of course, this isn't to speak on people who have to do that kind of work. And, our kind of wage economy is so unequal and unjust. But those who can make different decisions can sometimes feel ill-equipped to make that decision because they don't know what to do with their time. And this is where hobbies come in and relationships come in. Can have fun with other people who are there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I also think that it's realizing that even what the system tells you in terms of, okay, when you get to this point, then you have the liberty of time.
Yeah.
And my big realization was actually, regardless of where I am, with all the challenges, with having to keep roof over their head, food on the table, kids in school, with all of that, there is still wiggle room for me to design my life
Yes.
in a way that's more conducive to me as a holistic human being, as opposed to just, okay, I'm going to do the 15 hours a day, 5 days a week or 7 days a week. And when I reach 55 and now I have X amount in my bank account, then I'm going to take a step back and chill a little bit.
Yeah.
And my biggest lesson was, actually, it doesn't matter where I am. I do it within context of my circumstance.
Yes.
I may not be able to do it all the way, but I can still do something, as opposed to just, I'm going to be in this treadmill and I'm going to wait till I get there.
Because when you get there, you'll still have to get somewhere else, And I think the other thing that is very important is to understand that every decision that we make comes with its own consequences, So when you make the decision to say, I'm going to opt out of this, then it automatically means that suddenly you don't have a wine farm because you didn't make the money for it, but you've got to be happy with what you have. So if your goal is the wine farm, then you're never going to retire, and you've got to learn to exploit other people for their labor in order to get that, And if you decide, actually, I want to spend more time meaningfully with my family and with myself, then it means that this is the threshold of the lifestyle that you're going to be living, and you have to be happy with that. You can't have it all. And you have to decide what you want. You can be free with, some limitations to your material capacity, or you can chase the material at the expense of something else, So either way, there's a cost, and you just have to decide which price you're willing to pay. And we were not willing to pay the price of lots of things in exchange for, instead of lots of time and quality experiences as a family.
Yeah.
So we'd rather drive the older car.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like you're saying, it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
It's a compromise. It's a sacrifice to a certain extent, but it's not always a bad thing.
No, it's an investment.
Compromising on certain things is not always, when you're in a relationship, you compromise, you sacrifice to a certain extent, and you don't do it going, this person has made me make these choices.
Yes.
No, like, I made the choice to be with this person. And therefore now I'm building a life for this particular person, and certain things that perhaps I wanted to do before we became this extended unit, I can't do them the way I wanted to do them. And it's fine to leave some of the things by the wayside, because I've made a choice to be with this particular person.
And to live the life a certain way. Like, I like to think of it as an investment rather than as a sacrifice. Because when you sacrifice something, it's like you're losing something against your will. But when you make an investment, it comes at the cost of comfort and convenience for a longer term goal. And so the things that we do, like you say, the choices we make in our relationships and conflict resolution and peace building and supporting our spouses and being humble and, choosing to take the risk of working less, potentially making less money, but having more time. I like to look at that as an investment into the health and joy and purpose of what you are doing with your life, rather than as a sacrifice of money, because you actually are putting something in to receive a greater benefit that is more meaningful to you. It's not really a cost, it's more just an investment, so you will reap it down the line. And sacrifice is like you're losing it.
Yeah.
But when we make those kind of
I like how you're framing that. I like how you're framing that, because it is just a switch in that kind of that lens.
Yeah.
But it's also significant, because, like you're saying, an investment Yeah, even just the semantics of it, like the language of it, and how that impacts how we think and how we look at something. That difference between kind of sacrifice and investment, it's in my mind it's the same thing, but the use of language just changes. It changes even how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about it, like it's actually changing. It changes kind of like my energy and my perspective on that particular thing.
Yeah. And yes, investments are a sacrifice because you're not going to have the money today. Let's just put it like in monetary terms, but you will have more money in 30 years. How lovely, because then it means you're building towards something, you know? And because I was a stay-at-home mom, well, I still am a stay-at-home mom, but like I didn't really work for the first, I don't know, 7, 8 years. I was always a Sangoma, but I wasn't really a big part of the runnings of the company and everything for some time. And everybody would ask me like, you've let go of your life and you've sacrificed so much for the kids. And I was like, it's not a sacrifice, it's an investment. I'm investing in my children for their lives to be a certain way. I'm investing my time, my effort, my body, my everything towards building the family that I believe my children deserve, you know? And my husband is the same. Like he has to make a certain level of investment for the family to go in the direction, because, you know, marriage is an institution. So you've got to build it together like colleagues in a business. And that's just, you've got to invest. You've got to invest in the institution so that the institution can pay its dividends at some point.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. It was awesome chatting.
Thank you. You too. It was lovely to talk to you. I wish all my interviews could be like this. Thought-provoking and interesting.
It's also because I think it's also because we have we overlap, like our lives overlap.
It's true
in terms of people.
It's very true,
and it's been like that. It's been like that for years.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting for me. It's like, you know, the people around you. I know some of the people around you that you're very close with, and I also have a relationship with them. So you get a sense. You get a sense of people.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird, but it's not. So if you're open to it, you get a sense of people.
Yeah.
And an understanding of people and their energy and who they are through the, you know, common friends.
Yes.
Or, you know, that the things that connect us, even if it's not strongly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's very true. I've really enjoyed this interview, and it is nice to have like a community in common, because then you realize that you actually don't just have other people in common. You've got a lot of values and principles and approaches in common as well, which is always nice to know, to feel like in this crazy world with all of its challenges and divisions and everything, that there are other people that are walking along the way that you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. It was lovely to talk to you.
Likewise.
All right.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Please leave a review and subscribe. Check out the show notes for links to the guest, the podcast, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.